Most people assume high taxes are simply the price we pay for universal health care. Honestly, that story is far too simple, and it lets a much bigger truth hide in plain sight. If you really want to understand it, you have to look at a cold geographical fact first. Canada is one of the most sparsely populated large countries on Earth. Yet it maintains a first world standard of living across its entire massive territory. That creates a fundamental economic puzzle. How do you afford to pave roads, run schools, and string power lines for so few people spread so far apart? The math just doesn't work without a significant collective contribution. Think about the cost of keeping a hospital open in a remote northern community. The tax base there might be only a few thousand people. So who do you think pays for that? Services cost more here because the country's built different. You can't compare the infrastructure bill here to a densely packed European nation. But population density is only the starting point of this story. We also have a demographic structure that's working against the system. A larger portion of the population is now moving into retirement age. That means more people are drawing on pensions and healthcare services. And simultaneously, fewer working age people are contributing income tax. This creates a serious fiscal pressure that's already tightening. Now, layer on a commitment to a strong social safety net. It's not just about doctors and hospitals, It's about unemployment insurance, old age security, and child benefit payments. These programs are popular, but they aren't cheap to run. And they require a steady, reliable stream of government revenue. So where does that revenue actually come from? Look, Canada doesn't have a massive low-tax corporate sector like some countries. The government relies heavily on personal income tax for its funds. In fact, for most provinces, it's the single biggest source of revenue. But here's the thing that catches many newcomers by surprise. Provincial taxes are often where you really feel the pinch. The federal tax rates get all the attention, but your province takes a significant cut. And those rates vary wildly depending on where you live. Have you ever wondered why tax bills in Quebec or Nova Scotia look so different from Alberta's? Provincial choices about services directly drive those numbers up or down. Then we have the sales tax system, which adds another consistent layer. The GST is federal, but most provinces add their own PST on top of it. Every time you buy clothes, get a haircut, or fill up your car, you're contributing. It's a less visible tax, but it adds up quietly every single day. There's also a hidden factor in the very structure of our economy. We have a productivity problem that economists talk about all the time. Simply put, we aren't as efficient at creating value per worker as some of our peers, and a less productive economy generates less overall wealth to tax. So the government has to tax the existing wealth at a slightly higher rate to meet its goals. This isn't about laziness, it's about industrial structure and investment. But wait, doesn't Canada have all that oil and natural resource money? That's a great question, and it leads to another piece of the puzzle. Resource revenue is huge, but it's also incredibly volatile. A government can't reliably budget for schools and nurses based on the price of oil. So they need stable tax revenue from people and businesses year in and year out. And those tax rates can't swing wildly with the boom and bust cycle. Now, let's talk about a choice that's deeply built into the Canadian identity. We've collectively decided through our elections that we don't like big income inequality. So the tax system isn't just a piggy bank for services, it's a tool for redistribution. Higher earners don't just pay more because they have more money. They pay at a significantly higher marginal rate, actively redistributing wealth. That philosophical commitment has a direct price tag, But is that the only model for a compassionate society? Some countries focus on low taxes and encourage private charity instead. Here, the government largely handles that social role through your tax dollars. And that means the state's reach and its cost is simply broader. Honestly, have you ever added up all the separate taxes you actually pay? There's income tax, sales tax, property tax if you own a home, and fuel taxes. Don't forget excise taxes on alcohol and tobacco, and even carbon taxes now. We also tax estates and inheritances, which some places don't. It's this layered effect that makes the total burden feel so heavy. Each tax has a justification, but together they create a certain weight. But here's a curiosity hook that few people ever consider. What if high taxes are partly a result of relatively low other costs? Think about it. What don't most Canadians have to budget for? We don't have to save for massive medical emergencies or crippling student debt in the same way. University tuition, while not free, is lower here than in the United States, so in a way, the tax bill is replacing a bunch of other potential bills. It's a prepayment plan for a certain kind of life. Yet, the feeling of getting less for your money is a common complaint. You see, the efficiency of how tax dollars are spent is a whole other debate. There's a perception that government bureaucracy swallows too much of the cash. Whether that's true or not, the belief itself undermines the sense of value. And when you don't see a direct link between your payment and a service, resentment grows. But have you noticed how rarely we talk about defense spending? Canada's military budget as a share of the economy is lower than many NATO allies. That's a conscious choice that frees up funds for domestic programs. Different countries make different trade-offs, and this is one of ours. We also subsidize industries like agriculture and broadcasting through general revenue. Your taxes help a farmer in Saskatchewan and a TV producer in Toronto. It's a national project that goes beyond individual benefit. Now, let's get really practical for a second. The complexity of the tax code itself might be driving costs up. Compliance is a huge industry here, with accountants and software needed by millions. That's an indirect cost of the system that doesn't even go to the government. A simpler tax code might collect the same money with less headache. But simplifying it would create winners and losers, and that's a political nightmare. So we're left with a complex system that's expensive to administer and to obey. And all of this is happening in a federation, which adds another layer of cost. We have a federal government, 10 provinces, and 3 territories all running their own shows. Duplication and overlap between these levels isn't free. You're paying for multiple layers of government to sometimes do similar things. It's the cost of managing a country that tries to balance local and national control. Does that structure feel inevitable to you, or is it ripe for change? The answer might determine the future of your tax bill. So where does all this leave us when we look at the future? Demographics are the undeniable force that will shape the next chapter. As baby boomers continue to age, healthcare costs aren't just going to rise, they're going to skyrocket. That's not a political opinion, it's a simple demographic fact, and those costs will land squarely on the shoulders of a relatively smaller working population. Now, factor in the massive debts that governments took on during recent crises. The interest payments on that debt alone consume billions in annual revenue. That's money that can't go to new doctors or fixing roads, It just services the past, which tightens the squeeze on the present. So what are the actual real-world options on the table? One path is to raise taxes further to cover these rising costs. Another is to dramatically cut the services we've come to expect. A third, more hopeful path is to grow the economy and the tax base much faster. But honestly, each of these options is incredibly difficult to execute. Raising taxes meets fierce resistance, and you can understand why. Cutting services is politically toxic, especially for popular programs. And boosting economic growth requires decisions we've been unwilling to make for decades. It requires big bets on innovation, cutting red tape, and attracting investment. That brings us to the quiet conversation about immigration. Canada brings in a large number of immigrants, partly to offset that aging population. These new Canadians are vital future taxpayers who support the system. But there's a lag time before they're fully established and contributing at their peak. And in the short term, they also increase demand for services like housing and infrastructure. So is immigration a long-term solution or a short-term strain? Look, the truth is it's probably a bit of both. There's also the global factor that we can't ignore anymore. The world is competing for talented people and investment capital. Very high personal taxes can make it harder to attract and keep top earners. We've already seen some provinces tweak rates for this exact reason. The balance between competitive rates and necessary revenue is getting more delicate. This isn't just about numbers on a page. It's about a national story. What kind of Canada are we willing to pay for, and what are we willing to change? The high taxes might be a symptom of choices we're afraid to re-examine. Maybe we're trying to preserve a 20th century model in a 21st century world. That model was built for a younger, growing population in a less competitive globe. The pressure you feel in your paycheck is the sound of that model straining. So the next time you look at your pay stub, don't just see a deduction. See a reflection of a sprawling, aging country trying to keep a promise. See the cost of distance, of equality, and of a shared safety net. See a bill that comes due for living in a place that tries to look after everyone. The real question isn't why taxes are high today. It's whether we've built something valuable enough to sustain for tomorrow. And that's a question only the people paying for it can truly answer.